Hello, everyone, and welcome. If you could please type in the chat that you can hear me, I would greatly appreciate it. The computer's being a little slow tonight, so I hope that's not going to interfere with you hearing me or screens freezing or anything like that. So if you can type in the chat loud and clear, Chrissy, thank you very much. Laurel says yes, great, thank you. Doris, hello. Kavita. Michelle, thank you. Okay, we're good. Wonderful. All right, so I'll just pull up the PowerPoint and we can get started. Thank you, Tammy and Linda and Raquel. I really appreciate you attending tonight because I know this is a busy time of year and we know everybody is quite busy, and so these kinds of things are not first and foremost on your mind. Thank you, Jennifer and Jill, Olga, lots of you, Lucia, Christina, great, wonderful, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint, and we have to go to reading view for full screen. And I'm just going to check back, and yes, it's there. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about some new research regarding carbs and blood sugar in the gut. And I found it quite interesting. I mean, we still don't have a full picture of things, but I thought this was quite, give us some ways of thinking we might not have thought about. So, all right. Okay, so this is the agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about some stuff I've discussed in the past, just to sort of bring those maybe who haven't heard it up to speed. And then we'll talk about the glycemic index. And then we're going to talk about some new gut research. And then what we can do as practitioners. So right now, and a lot of people are under the impression that we know a lot. We don't. And this is not just about the gut. This is about how we function, period. We're still filling in all kinds of pieces. So we just have pieces, and we have to, as practitioners, try and work with those pieces and do something positive for clients. And I know that we frequently run into problems because things don't fit exactly the way we were taught they should fit. And the truth is that we actually have more knowledge of the outside natural world than we have about the gut right now. So it may seem like we know a ton, and there have been thousands of research studies published in the last 4 to 5 years, but they aren't even close to figuring it all out. But they have found out some very interesting things. So it will be years, if ever, they figure out exactly everything. Science is... they tend to get focused in one direction and they forget the rest of the other directions. So we may not ever, but I'm sure we're going to learn more. But right now we know a few things, and they can be very helpful to us in planning protocols. So that's kind of what my focus is for tonight, is like, what can we do with the information we have? I think it's very validating for what we do if we do what we're supposed to do. And we don't get caught up in the fadism that tends to happen in the health industry. But I think we can make our protocols fit the client better. So this is some of the stuff that was discussed previously. I did a webinar on metabolic syndrome, and so this came up there. This is also in the Healthy Gut program as well. So and I've read this in other places, so this may be more commonly known now. But essentially, they have found that there are what they call obese bacteria. So when they look at obese mice, they find that they have specific strains of bacteria that extract more calories from the food than when they look at the bacteria that is in lean mice. And this is not a good bacteria, bad bacteria thing. I actually read an article when I was getting ready for this, and they were actually making that it was, the pathogenic bacteria that was making people obese, and, good bacteria. It's not like that at all. There are good bacteria strains that would be the obese bacteria extracting more calories, and There are good bacteria strains that are extracting less calories, and there's a reason for that, and we'll talk about that because I found a really interesting piece of information later on. But you can understand that there might be circumstances in our past history when food was not always plentifully available that we might need to be able to extract more calories from the food that we had. So this is what they're learning right now. When they transfer the bacteria, this obese bacteria, from the obese mice into the lean mice, they gain weight, and when they reverse the process, the obese mice lose weight when they get lean bacteria. So that's very interesting and could be somewhat helpful to us. They speculate this might be why people have the yo-yo dieting effect, where they go on some type of weight loss program and then they gain it all back. Now, I can come up with some other theories for that as well, but there does seem to be this effort that the people don't necessarily go back to the same way they were eating, and they are not, they may not have been on a super restrictive weight loss program, which we know does slow down metabolism, and it still happens. So there could be something else going on, and this is what they're speculating about. So you can change gut bacteria, and it takes months, possibly a year or longer, for microbiomes of obese people to convert to lean microbiomes. So in other words, if you have too much of this obese bacteria, it's going to take time. So that is more likely a reason why someone might gain the weight back, if this gut bacteria is the reason. So that's good information to know. And this means that the clients need to understand this in order to not go back to what they would consider their normal level of food or normal eating habits, which is a very common thing to do. I'm sure you've seen this even with people fighting health conditions as well. They adopt a healthier lifestyle to help them with the health condition, or in this case, to lose weight. And then once they are in the clear, they think they are free to just go back to doing what they're doing. So that could be a factor. And we could have bacteria driving those urges to go back to what they were doing because of the type of bacteria they were. But what I'm suggesting here then is that we don't look at the usual weight loss period when they meet their goals, and hopefully that's a longer period. Like if they're losing the weight more slowly, then that would be a longer period, and that would be helpful. And hopefully what we're doing is incorporating more foods that can shift them from obese bacteria to lean bacteria. Whoops, come back here. And so when we look at the people who lose weight and keep it off, because there's I think the statistic is 5% of the people who lose a significant amount of weight do keep it off, we should be looking at the quality of the diet they had, because they probably were indirectly doing some of the things they should have been doing to move the gut bacteria in a certain direction. So there are foods that can help with this because they found 2 phytonutrients that can help promote lean bacteria. They are naringenin and apigenin. And mice who have lower levels of naringenin and apigenin are more prone to yo-yoing, gaining the weight after weight loss. And I'm just including this so this is information for you. These are some of the foods that can help with that. So chamomile. I'm going through a chamomile phase right now. All I want to do in the evening is drink chamomile. I've never been a tea drinker like this before. And I know chamomile is good for the gut. I had researched it for the Healthy Gut program, so I know it's good for the gut. But I don't know why, but right now my body is saying drink chamomile. So I'm really into chamomile right now. You've also got horsetail, yarrow, perilla, vervain, lemon balm, red wine, grapefruits, oranges, celery, parsley, cilantro, beer, and tomatoes. So you got a list there that could appeal to people, right? There's some things on there that might make them feel more normal. They're not necessarily just drinking like lemon balm or something like that is unfamiliar to them. And then for naringenin, it's citrus fruit again, citrus juice, almonds, pistachios, and red wine again. So I'm just giving that information because if you can incorporate some of those foods into their protocol, both while they're losing weight and afterwards, and finding things and ways that they would like to consume these, this might be one way to help encourage their microbiome to move towards the lean side rather than, what they probably have is more obese bacteria. All right, so that brings me to the glycemic index. And again, I did go over this when I did the metabolic syndrome webinar, and it is in Healthy Gut. But again, it's startling information, and now I've got another piece of research to add to this. So if you know anything about the glycemic index, it's got a lot of flaws, right? It's based on an average, so it's not when they test people for glycemic response to certain foods, every person is not responding the same way. So people are basically fed a specific food in an amount that contains 50 grams of carbs. You can't do the glycemic index unless everybody is eating the same amount of carbs. And different foods have different amounts of carbs. And this is what put like if you can look at the image on the right-hand side, you can see watermelon is on the higher side. And it's like, there's no calories in watermelon. It's 95% water. And you'd have to eat one heck of a lot of watermelon to get 50 grams of carbs. That's like 200 calories. So this is one of the flaws of it. And of course, there is the glycemic load, which takes that into consideration, takes the portion size that would be reasonable for people to eat and make the glycemic index a little more reasonable. But it's still not the best indicator of how someone responds, a given person responds to a given food. And so they measure this response, right, when they literally put people in a room, feed them the food, measure their blood sugar before and after, and that's how they get the numbers. And one of the other flaws is they don't consider that the food is generally part of a meal, which is going to alter the glycemic response as well. So those are the two biggest flaws. Even if the 50-gram carb thing can be taken care of with glycemic load, you still have those two big flaws with it. Now, some people will have a higher glycemic response than the number indicated, and some will have a lower response or no response to the food, because that's how an average works. An average doesn't mean what is normal. It means the sum of the total value divided by the number of people. So we don't know if, for example, if something is 54, we don't know if the majority of people are 54, or that's just the way the average worked out, and some were super low and some were super high, and it averaged out to 54. We don't know. So that's another issue with this idea of having an average. So I mentioned this book before. It's called The Personalized Diet. It's a project that is ongoing, and they've published a book. And what they have found is basically this, that in this project, they measure blood sugar with different foods, and they find higher responses to some things and no responses to others. And they didn't find any uniform blood sugar responses to different foods. So there was no consistency. They set up this project, and I did post the PDF slides. That link is real. So if you get to the PDF slides in the Inspired Learning Hub page for this particular webinar, you can click on that. And I'll send out the link for that tomorrow with the replay anyway. You can go and read more about this. But what they really did in this, and which is why I liked it so much, is they measure blood sugar with every food. So these people who participate in the project measure their blood sugar like consistently for all the foods that they eat for, I don't know how long the period of time is. And then in the project, they also sample gut bacteria. So they're trying to build a story as to what gut bacteria might be affecting things, which again, they're a long way away from really knowing anything, at least at the time of writing this book. That was over, a year or two ago that I found this book. So I don't know where they are. I haven't heard anything. I did find some interesting research that some other researchers are doing. And they also look at diet, lifestyle, and genetics as well. So what they found is that people who sleep more are less likely to have post-meal blood sugar spikes. So that's helpful, right? That's a good piece of information for us to have. And that sleeping at night was better than sleeping during the day for this. They found that exercise helps, but it does not work for all people. And sometimes it helps right away. And Other people, it will take up to 24 hours to see an effect. So that's interesting, right? So, right. They also found that less salt and more water, salty foods increase blood sugar spikes. Water with meals lowers it. And when they say waters with meals, they didn't specify how much water that is. So I know we basically tell people not to drink water with their meals, but it doesn't necessarily mean they were, taking a full glass of water. Women have higher blood sugar spikes when they have their period. Stress raises blood sugar. We knew that. Caffeine only raises blood sugar in some people. And a person can have a minestrone soup spike their blood sugar and then not have bread do it. Brown rice can spike blood sugar in some people. Grapes and tomatoes can spike blood sugar, but not ice cream in some people. So these are the same persons. So the grapes and the tomatoes will spike the blood sugar, but the ice cream won't. And what this means is there's no one type of diet that is going to be right for everyone. So they also found that neither low carb, high fat, or low fat, high carb diets are right for all people either. So in hearing this, I have a question for you guys. I'm going to come back to visit you. Louise says, I had some red wine tonight. Okay, so in hearing this information, what is going through your head when you're thinking about helping clients? What does this mean to you as a practitioner who has been, trained the way we have? What does this say to you? Does this make you more hopeful for what we do, or does this confuse you more, or how do you see this? Just type in the chat how you see this, because I know how I react to it, and I see it in a positive way. I'm just wondering if you guys are seeing the same thing I'm seeing. I'm waiting for you because there's a time delay with this particular webinar season. Barbara says more confusing. Uma says more individualization required. Yeah, that's how I see it. Nikki says more complex to determine differences in clients. Yes, that's true too. Tanya says confusing. Nancy says all unique, pay attention to your own body. Tanya says confusing again. Raquel says it's discouraging, but we have tools to personalize it, and it could be even more effective. Just confirms everyone has different needs. I see this as an opportunity for eventual doctor nutritionist cooperation. That's a really good one, Deborah. I'm not surprised by it. Says Michelle, individualization required, but how to determine the foods is the, how do we do that? Lucia says, comes to mind what individuals likes, desires, aversions, aggravations to food. Jill says, interesting. I would say it even more specialized for each person. And Doris says, hopeful because it means we need to be more mindful of what we eat. Very true. Using individualization required. Audrey, more time consuming to help clients find the right time. You guys got lots. Cool. I have learned that client and with autism I have learned the client's needs, and with autism, she has a specific carb count, but an odd food will throw her right off, even if the carb count should be right for insulin. Eloise says, this means a lot of trial and error. Jennifer says, hi, Jennifer, food journal. Yes, definitely food journal. And Audrey says, do they need to wear a blood sugar monitor every few weeks to decide their best diet? Well, I don't know that we can go there. Yes, genetics does play a role too, but you're all saying kind of the same thing, that clients basically need to be more aware of what that works for them. There is more individualization required, but what you're not saying, and this is the other side of it. So yes, more individualization is required, but that means that people who develop a specific type of diet right? And promote this is how we should eat, or this is going to do, solve all the problems in a given area, are not basing it on the reality of the human body and how we are all individuals. Consuela says, actually need an MRT mediator release test and a GI map, except they don't know yet what it is we need to do what yet. They don't know what bacteria is specific to helping what foods yet. My personal knowledge with regard to that, again, I don't know, I can't say specific strains do help with specific foods. But my understanding of it is right now is that specific foods feed certain bacteria. And in the feeding process, it can affect the way we utilize the carbs in a positive way. So if you have the strains that are good for the food, and it can feed off that food, they're less likely to spike up blood sugar because there's less of that food, if that makes any sense. Or I shouldn't say that. They utilize the food in a different way because the specific strains for that food. So specific strains for tomatoes and specific strains for different types of tomatoes, specific strains for brown rice, specific strain, like this is where it's kind of going. This is why it's complicated. But the overall point you were all making is, we are supposed to do individualized protocols. We're not supposed to be doing one size fits all. We're not supposed to have a set protocol for clients with given conditions. And this gives us more freedom to explore with the client what might work for them, if that makes sense. So to me, it's good news because it means we don't have to buy into what the latest theory is and diet that somebody is pushing in for whatever purpose. We can stay to what we know, that we're all biochemically different, and therefore we might have they have more need for us to help sort them out. They need the impartial view and the knowledge of food that we have in order to help them sort through it, if that makes any sense. So I think it's a positive thing for us as a profession in that we have more options for them. If we remember that we have more options, I do find some of my fellow practitioners forget that we have all kinds of options at our disposal, and they do tend to sometimes do the same thing for every client. But if we remember that that's not necessary, and we spend a little time getting them to be more observant, some of you said, getting them more in tune with their own body, making them more observant, having them do the food journal, because right now you really can't do a test to figure out what yet. I don't know where this project is going. It may get to that point in the future as they examine more and more guts with different blood sugar responses. I mean, they're going to start out with groups of bacteria as opposed to specific strains, and it may take them years to get to specific strains. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's a positive thing. All right. So this is a new study that I found where they took 327 participants without diabetes. So these were just healthy people by their definition. And they measured the glycemic index to what they ate for 6 days. And then what they did is they analyzed their gut microbiome, their exercise level, age, and other factors, and they created a model that could predict the glycemic response 62% of the time versus when they tried to base it just on carbs or just on calories. So for carbs, it was 40%, and calories, it was 32% of the time. So again, they're trying to look at it from a more individualized perspective. And what they concluded from this study was that obviously personalized diets are the way to go. So, hey, that's good news for us, right? And people may not have to give up foods in a given category because of this information and because of we don't know what's in someone's gut. And so the goal would be to help people find the specific foods that fit their microbiome. Now, I think that is a bit of the wrong way to put it. So they're saying find the foods to fit the microbiome they have, when in actuality, most people's microbiomes are not that great. And it would be also it would be better if we found foods that help support the microbiome be better, and as opposed to leaving them as they are. But from a glycemic response, this is what they're suggesting. Now, this is on another scary note. So again, this idea of personalized diets is catching on. So like everything in the world, once something becomes something that's catching on, people try to make money from it. And so Nestle has launched a personalized diet program in Japan. And basically what people do is they use an app to post pictures of what they're eating. And then Nestle recommends dietary changes and supplies sprinkled with supplements that can be sprinkled on or mixed in with a variety of foods and teas. And if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what would, because it's taking away the whole concept, really, and turning it into a product that someone can make money off of. And it isn't really teaching people to respond to real food with their own body and how they're, figuring out how their own body responds, right? It's the last thing we would want to see. But this is what happens when research finds certain information, somebody jumps in. It can be, an MD writing a book, or an ND, or it could be, a company like this. Somebody's always trying to capitalize on these types of information to make more money, and it's not helpful at all. And it's just, this is the world we live in. We have to deal with it. But I don't know about you. I would think most people would prefer just to be able to eat foods they know work for them and not have to buy into supplements and go to all the trouble of waiting for someone to tell them what to eat. Because basically that's what this is doing. I think this concept that we tell people what to eat instead of helping people figure out how they work and what their body responds to, I think that needs to change in some way. Okay, so then I came across some information. Well, I didn't come across it, actually. Helen, I don't know if Helen's here tonight, but Helen came across this, but this was a perfect research information that sort of goes further with how complex this is, and we might be a little mistaken about how things work. So this was on the mitochondria, and if you're familiar with the mitochondria, it gives energy to cells so it can function. So gut microbiota signals the mitochondria, and this has been shown to alter mitochondrial metabolism, activate immune cells, induce inflammasome signaling, which is connected to inflammation, and alter epithelial barrier function. So they have already, prior to this information that with regard to glucose, prior to this was already known that there is this communication with the gut bacteria and the mitochondria. It is also a bidirectional relationship. So a lot of these communication pathways the gut bacteria has with different parts of the body, the different parts of the body can also communicate with the gut bacteria. So the gut bacteria communicates directly to the mitochondria, and the mitochondria communicates to the gut bacteria via the endocrine and immune systems, so hormones and immune products. So most of the research of gut to mitochondria has been for pathogenic bacteria. So there's not a lot with regard to good bacteria. And what they have found is that it affects mitochondrial function in favor of infection and inflammation. So they knew that the pathogenic bacteria, or they have known for some time, and again, it's not that long ago, we're talking maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, they figured this out, that there is this relationship. They have also found that good bacteria produces short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate and secondary bile acids. I don't know if you're familiar with what a secondary bile acid is, but when bile is secreted into the duodenum and carrying a toxin, right, the liver prepares the toxins for detoxification, and then it attaches to bile and goes into the duodenum. As it's traveling through the intestines, bacteria can separate the bile acid from the toxin and reuse the bile acids. That's called a secondary bile acid. And they have found that in this relationship with the bile acids and butyrate, that what it's doing is helping control inflammation and produce energy amongst other activities that the short chain fatty acids do. So they've known that for a few years as well. So now the new research, they found that glucose does not appear to be the driver of chronic inflammation in type 2 diabetes and obesity. They looked at the process of glycolysis, which involves the converting of glucose to energy. I'm sure you're familiar with the term. And what they found is glycolysis in type 2 diabetics did not stimulate type 2 diabetes inflammation. So whatever inflammatory products they have linked, because there's so many different inflammatory products, certain ones are linked with type 2 diabetes, and other ones are linked with other types of things, right? And they didn't find that the glucose metabolism had anything to do with it. So this is on a cellular level, and that means it's not doing it on a cellular level, if it's doing it at all. They found that T cells from type 2 diabetic subjects have altered mitochondria. And the altered mitochondria import or oxidize fatty acids, and this activates the inflammation in healthy cells. They also found that mitochondrial changes combine with fatty acid metabolites and to activate the inflammation. And the only one they mentioned was this C-fatty acyl carnitine. And I Googled it. I couldn't get any specifics as to how it's produced or why. I did find this diagram with, here's all the ATP and the mitochondrial membrane, and you can see carnitine. So clearly has some relationship to carnitine, but I think the carnitine might be a carrier for the fatty acid or something like that. I couldn't find much information at all, but that's where it shows up. And so this is what they are finding and suspecting might be driving the inflammation. Again, this is really new information, so I'm sure we'll find out more. And it's really interesting because there are mitochondrial supplements now, and I was looking at a couple to see what the common ingredients are. Like when you look at, this is what I do, when I'm looking up a new type of supplement for a specific purpose, I look to see what different supplement companies have put in as ingredients to see if there's, common thing. And one of the things I found that was common in a lot of them was acetyl-carnitine, which of course is a metabolite that occurs after it's carnitine. So it goes to carnitine, then acetyl-carnitine. I don't know what that means, but I just found this kind of interesting that they're going and on a more cellular level and finding that there's more driving the process of what happens with regard to inflammation, and it isn't all about carbs, which is a good news for people who would like to eat carbs, which is most of us. Anyway, now dysbiosis has been connected to type 2 diabetes, so it's not the least bit surprising to me that they would find more connections with the gut bacteria and how it affects inflammation with diabetics, or with anyone else for that matter. And different strains of good bacteria have been studied and found to be helpful to regulate blood sugar. So again, it's really hard to get an overall picture of this story, but they do, because they're trying to build products, right? They're going to try to sell products. So a lot of the research is about specific strains, which will eventually end up in a probiotic supplement. They have found Staphylococcus aureus, which is found in different parts of the body, but it's very common on the skin. And they have found that obese people have higher levels of Staphylococcus aureus on their skin. And they found it also induces, in a rabbit study, insulin resistance. So this could be one of the strains of pathogenic bacteria that may be linked to diabetes. So we will hear more about this. We're going to hear more about different strains, pathogenic strains that are connected to specific diseases, because again, that's where the research is going. And then I found some even more interesting carb info, and this kind of takes us back to what we were talking about earlier. So they love to study the Hadza people of Tanzania. And they may be our best bet to understand how gut bacteria should function, because they are the ones who are still living really indigenously. And their diet is whole foods. They eat seasonally. You know, they're much more connected to nature, at least for now. And what they found is that we have different composition of bacteria in different seasons. Some types of bacteria completely disappear only to reappear when the season changes. And that was a very startling piece of information. And I want to see if any of you know why that's a really important piece of information. So they disappear, they're gone, they're not found in the stool, and then season changes and they're back. Why is that a really, really positive piece of information? That's right, Carol. She says, because I thought when we lost a strain, it was gone for good. That's what I thought too. Obviously, it shows that seasonal foods support bacteria. That's true too, which is good information as well. But the big thing is, because we're encouraging people to eat a more diverse diet to improve the strains that they have and the quality and quantity of strains they have. And the research that has existed on Western diet human microbiomes, looking at babies and children, have found that if they don't build up a certain level by the age of 2, they might never have as much as they need on an ongoing basis. Now, again, these people are much better. Their gut is much better than ours. So we don't know if this would translate for us if we were missing strains. But the fact that strains can be completely gone and then show up again is not a bad piece of information. That's a good piece of information. And that should give us all hope, especially if, we didn't get the best start in life, and maybe we have been dealing with gut issues the entire life. And nobody says that, there's a magic button here that you start eating seasonally and all of a sudden your microbiome, reorients itself. We're kind of damaged. And they've done lots of studies on the Western diet and shown how much different our microbiomes are from different indigenous groups in different parts of the world. But it does tell us, again, that the whole food diet has, Jennifer says, they could be dormant. That's very true. And Nikki's suggesting perhaps there are soil-based organisms and that's where they're coming from. That's a possibility, Nikki, but from what I understand about soil-based is they don't stay. So again, they didn't specify whether these ones were residential or transient, so they could have been soil-based. But it doesn't really matter if they are transient or they are residential. If they're there, they're helping us. And that's the good news, right? We import a lot of food, so only locally grown. Well, again, I got more information that's very interesting with regards to seasonal eating that could support more local foods. Because it's one thing when you live in California, your seasons are 3 a year, so everything's in season all year long. But when you live up here in Toronto, our growing season's quite short, so we have limitations to what we could eat locally that would have been grown in soil. Obviously we can have greenhouse stuff here too, but But anyway, but it does start to kind of paint a picture, which is, you'll see in a minute, is actually good news for people who like certain types of foods. This picture here is actually of Tanzanian food. I Googled in Google Images Tanzanian food. This dish came up. It looks really tasty. All right, so let me get to the next good part. So what they found by looking at the Hadza people is that we should be eating more denser carbs in winter. Okay, so we knew that. We knew that traditionally, if we were eating seasonally, this is when we eat the root vegetables and the potatoes and, you know, the carrots and all those things that are available to us. But they have a really good reason why. I always assumed, and this is what I would always say, is that it's because they're richer. They usually have a higher fat content, which gives us fuel. If you want to look at our ancestors, they didn't have central heating, so they needed to produce more heat right from their bodies, and denser, richer foods can do that. But you know, a lot of these foods, especially when they're in soups and stews and things, are considered comfort foods, which a lot of people really like. And I don't know about you, but my body tells me to eat these foods as we move in, as soon as it starts to get cold, and in the winter months. You know, I eat a lot of soups and things, which I don't do in the summer per se. But what they found was that these foods, the potatoes, the carrots, the turnips, the rutabagas, these winter foods actually help with winter weight. So basically what we would have done in the past is we often gained some weight in the fall for the winter, and then to help us get the weight off so that we're ready for the spring, these foods are the ones that helped us lose weight. And so what they said in the research article was that instead of eating potatoes and carrots in the Western world, we eat smoothies, salads, and berries in the winter because we can do it now, because we can get all these foods, and they wouldn't have been available to us in winter, and we're missing out this opportunity to shed winter weight, because most people, if their weight fluctuates at all, it generally does. And I don't mean in a significant way, but it can be slightly higher. And some people are so diligent about their weight, they keep eating the salads and whatever all through the year. And don't get me wrong, I like a salad too, but I really like a salad more in the summer than I do in the winter. So I thought, okay, this is a really good piece of information for us when we're trying to help people find foods that might serve them better and their gut bacteria, and if they have weight issues and whatever, like, we're not steering them away from potatoes. We're saying eat a potato. I've told people to eat potatoes. They're really happy when you tell them they can eat a potato. Potato is a wonderful food. It got such a bad rap for no reason. It has hundreds of beneficial chemicals in it, most of which they haven't even figured out what they do yet. It's got lots of vitamins and minerals and all kinds of things, and it's a reason why it's been a staple for so many generations. But like all the root vegetables are very, very nutritious. Beets and turnips and carrots, and you got their sweet potatoes in there, and there's so many things that people could be eating that they've been sort of steering away from. And because we have not been eating this way, and eating with, this is again from the article, they are saying that because we don't eat the foods we're supposed to eat in the right season, we are creating a gut that promotes inflammation and weight gain. That's what they're saying. So this is the bacteria that are of most significance, and I was too lazy to rewrite this, so I just took it from the article and put it in here. This is what they said. When we don't eat wintertime foods that the Prevotella, so it's the Prevotella bacteria strains that are designed to digest these winter foods, then they die out, and as a result, digestion becomes sluggish and food waste builds up in the colon. Fat-promoting bacteria feed on these undigested food particles and promote harmful metabolic waste that over time creates a toxic load in the body, And because these toxins have to be filtered through the liver, the organ becomes too overworked to perform optimally with its other important duties, including fat burning. So I don't know, that seems like a good reason to eat a potato to me. I don't know if you want to eat a potato, but I want to eat a potato. I eat potatoes all the time. I like potatoes. So I thought that was very good news. There was another study where the adults who had more Provotella bacteria in relation, so they looked at Bacteroides and Provotella, and they found that they lost 63% more on a high fiber diet. So a high fiber diet would include all these foods, right? Potatoes with the skin, grains, legumes. These are all things that people tend to eat more of in the winter. And then those with lower levels. So again, so they're finding this is being backed up by other research. And so basically this means more beans, more grains, more root vegetables in winter. I don't know if you think that's good news. Do you think that's good news? Do you like that? I liked it. And what happens is you speed up winter weight loss, preventing unexplained weight gain. So again, for us, right, this is good news because we can offer clients something. Heather says, yes, I like it. Michelle says, check out the book, The Potato Hack by Tim Steele. I'm assuming that's a positive book about potatoes. Nikki says, Dr. McDougall, starch, and Chef AJ, sweet and regular potatoes. Yeah. Again, it's a very sustaining food. It should never have been labeled bad. And again, we also know potatoes, especially the white potatoes or yellow potatoes, are loaded with resistant starch, which feeds a lot of good bacteria strains, especially in the colon. And Milka, sorry. Also, Joan Di Gusso's The Organic Life, Confessions of a Suburban Homesteader. I'm assuming that would have some good information about, it's not easy in some cultures to eat locally. Like, it's hard in Canada to eat locally all year round. We do have our local farmers' produce that are the root vegetables, the potatoes, the apples, the pears, but it's amazing how much is brought in from the U.S. Even in season, even in the summer, you have to read the little signs to see where the food is coming from even in the health food stores to find the Ontario produce. Like I know in one of the grocery stores here, they actually set up a section to make it really easy to find the local stuff. Like that's how unused most people are to look for local stuff. They don't even know to look. So to support Ontario produce, they set up this big section with a tent in the middle of the store, so you can find it really easily. All right. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to go back to the PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, another study found that adults today have more difficulty maintaining the same weight that we would have 20 to 30 years ago. So in other words, they collected data from 36,400 Americans between 1971 and 2008, and the physical activity data of 14,419 people between 1988 and 2006. And they were grouped by food intake, age, exercise, and BMI. And a given person in 2006 would have a BMI 2.3 points higher to their similar counterpart in 1988. So in other words, what we've changed in the last 30 plus years is having an effect on our overall BMI. So it's actually harder for us, despite what we know, despite all the different healthy eating attempts that are out there. Despite all the information and nutrition information, it doesn't matter if you're talking alternative or conventionally, people are trying to eat, or are more aware of, the benefits of healthy food. They may not always be eating them, but that's kind of scary. So you got to say, well, why, right? So we also have to look at this time period. So the 80s was really the start of more antibiotic use, and it really peaked in the 90s, where you could basically go to your doctor and ask for a prescription for antibiotics, and they'd give it to you if you had a cold or whatever. Like they really, everything was, and when in doubt, antibiotics, go on antibiotics, right? Whereas if you go back to the 70s, they would want a reason to give you a prescription for an antibiotic, right? They weren't giving women antibiotics in childbirth unless they were having cesarean. There's so many. They weren't throwing kids on antibiotics at the drop of a hat. So that was a big increase. Now they're trying to cut back on it, but that's only in recent years. The fast food industry has changed a lot. It's worse. So the portion sizes in the 60s and 70s of fast foods were much, much smaller. A hamburger really was a hamburger. And they have, there was no such thing as a cronut, which is a croissant with a donut, and, all these other horrible things that they've come out with. There's just more encouraging people to do strange things with food that isn't really good. The Food Network has not been helpful. Sometimes they have real food in some of these food competitions, but sometimes they're working with ingredients that are just ridiculous. We are more sedentary because we have more we can do sitting on our butt. So if you go back to the 60s and 70s, there was lots of television and stuff like that, but it wasn't like it is today, where you could literally plant yourself on the couch and just binge watch all you wanted, anything you wanted. You had to wait for shows to come and whatever. And there wasn't a computer. There wasn't an internet to keep you occupied. So we are more sedentary, even though we may be making an effort to go out and get specific exercise, like we might go to the gym or we might go for a walk or whatever. Some people, a lot of people don't. In general, our daily life is more sedentary. And those little, every time you stand up and do things, those count. It shouldn't be that you exercise 30 minutes a day and that's it. And of course, we've been discouraged from eating the comfort foods in the winter, and we've had more availability of the summer foods. So if you look at all of that, that's had an enormous effect on the gut. Throw stress in there. It's more stressful now than it was 30 years ago, believe it or not. Much, much more stressful. We are busier. It seems the more we get new technology, what do? We work more. It doesn't save us any time at all. We end up doing more. So it's not surprising to me that this, we're looking at seeing these gut connections to weight and these gut connections to glycemic index and glucose, which we also know glucose could be turned to fat and promote weight gain too, like if we have too much. We know all these things. So it's not surprising to me that we would be having more difficulty with weight in general. And again, this is an average. So, some people are not having any problem at all, and some people are having more of a problem than this. But that's an awful lot of people to look at the statistics of. So I thought that was kind of interesting. All right. So what does this mean for us? I think this means we have to rethink what we recommend and when. So we have to be mindful of not having sort of a limited perspective in the range of foods that we can recommend. We want to be doing our best. If foods if they're natural foods we're talking about, I'm not talking about refined foods and stuff like that. I don't believe we should encourage people to eat them. I don't think it's a crime if they do from time to time. I don't think that's a big deal. People can treat themselves from an emotional perspective anytime they like. I don't think that's a bad thing per se, but in general, we want them to eat more natural foods. But we have to be aware that they could be a glycemic trigger, or foods that we think are a glycemic trigger are not, and they shouldn't be discouraged from that. And we need to counter the negative carb info that has permeated in the last 10 to 15 years. It's disgusting how carbs got on the hit list for weight gain without any research to really back it up. And as I said, people are really happy when you tell them they can eat a potato. So I think people still have the instinct for eating comfort foods in winter, so that's an easy thing to, I mean, look at that picture. Don't you want that? I want that. It looks delicious. It's a really pretty bowl too. But they've been made to feel guilty about this, and many are probably fighting the urge, so we can help them say, you know, no, this has a place. If this feels good to you and you feel satisfied, that's something you need to consider. Now, some people's version of comfort food today is too refined, and it won't help them. So, you know, we want to kind of move them more towards whole foods. And explaining some of this research to clients will help them start thinking differently. So, you know, I'm not a big one for overwhelming clients with information, but you're trying to counter a mass media engine that just brainwashes people so easily and so quickly, and makes it difficult for us to get whole foods into people because of how they're categorized. So if you're going to explain the kind of research I just was talking about, just keep it very simple, right? You don't have to cite the research. You don't have to produce it, because if somebody wants them, if you go to where the video, and I'm sending this out tomorrow, where the video is posted, I have included the references. You got a document there. They want the references. You can produce them if needed. But most people aren't looking for that, so you don't need it. So you just want to talk to them about it, right? So you can explain lean bacteria versus obese bacteria. That is pretty straightforward. One takes more calories, and you can see why, right? You can see that probably we have this obese bacteria more in the fall. That's probably one of the types of strains that become more prevalent in the fall to help us gain some weight for the winter. And then we have more of the lean bacteria with these foods, the winter foods, to help us lose weight back for the spring. Like, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And you can tell them that gut bacteria can determine what spikes blood sugar. So this gives them a reason to work on their gut and try to find the right, you know, foods that help them function better. And they're going to feel better physically too when they do this. So it's not like this is painful for them. You can tell them certainly that denser carbs in winter help promote more lean bacteria for the spring. That's a really good piece of information. Like, you just keep it simple like that. You don't go into, and it won't overwhelm them, right? And you can say this is where what research is starting to show. That's the expression I use. Research is starting to show, because we know research is going to keep changing and deepening our understanding of things. And then you can also tell them that glucose is not the driver of inflammation as was suspected. And again, that may or may not be important to them. They may not even be that concerned about inflammation at this point. You know, some people are more informed than other people about how health conditions develop. So, but I do think that we have to play a role in countering the information that is out there that has made it difficult for us to get them to eat real food. That's the scary part. So we've got all these people out there promoting things like, you know, no carbs, and, you know, different foods are bad, and don't eat tomatoes, and all this stuff. And there's no context for it, making it difficult for us to make simple recommendations. And that's very frustrating. I would just pick one of those types of things to tell them, the one you think is going to have the most value to them, or it's going to be the one that makes the biggest difference in their understanding, so they'll make a change, because that's the thing you want to do, right? And so just be smart about it. What works for them is what works, right? That's it. So think outside the box, and, you know, try to come up with something maybe they haven't tried, or that changes what their perspective is. And what they think they know isn't working. So this is one that comes up, because I know you run into people who kind of are resistant to you, but you just have to say it, like, well, you know, what you're doing is obviously not working, or why are you seeing me, right? I'm not saying you would put it exactly that way, but they need to know that obviously what they think they know is not necessarily what they need to know. So this is, I hope, gives you something to think about. This is why I kind of wanted to do this one, especially this time of year when people are more prone to wanting to eat things of a different nature than they would typically eat throughout the year. And some of those things are carbs. We really don't know enough about how we work, especially on an individual level. And that's going to take time. But we do have enough knowledge about the quality of foods, lowering stress, exercise. So even though we don't know everything there is to know about how we work, we do have a lot of things that can help, and we know they can help. We've seen them help. And we know that, a trial and error approach is not a bad thing. If it's going to determine what people can eat, then it's a good thing. And so we've got lots to offer. And that's what's important, right? We're going to use the information well, and we'll inspire people. And this is what we are supposed to be doing. And we have to remember that we do need to get our voice in there, because even though scientists are researching this, and I appreciate a lot of the research they're doing and some of the interesting information that they are coming out with, but they still are coming at it from a scientific perspective. And they may still have the illusion that there's going to be some type of, absolute answer, because that's kind of the way the scientific mind works in order to kind of create the structure of research. So they may never be on the same page as where we want to be, where we want to have people having really good quality lifestyles with, foods they love and enjoy that work well in their bodies, which is more what we want to do. And I think we see a bigger picture. I think we see a whole world picture, that there is room in our world for different types of foods and different types of ways of looking at foods, preparing foods, mixing foods, and as well as all the lifestyle stuff we do in exercise. So I hope you found this informative. And now I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. And I'm coming back to you. And that should put me back on the screen, but maybe it won't. I don't know. Maybe I do that. I don't know. Sometimes this system works, sometimes it doesn't. Sherry is saying more people had gardens. Yep, yards, frequent outdoor physical activity. Now everything is condensed, less green space. Raquel says, yum. Jennifer says, thank you so much. Raquel says, thank you. Michelle, wonderful information. Thank you. Heather says, very informative. That's good to know. I'm glad, because I think we need to have these conversations, right? We need to know everything we can possibly know that supports whole food, right? So lots of thank yous. Okay, so I don't know if anybody has any questions. If you want to ask any, go ahead. If not, then we can call it a night. Consuelo says, very informative. Thank you. Elizabeth, lots of thank you. You guys are so nice. I hope you're all in a good mood. I hope you're looking forward to the holiday season, and that you're getting some time off, and you're going to have some things you want to do that are what you want to do. Okay, I don't see any questions. Nikki says, happy holidays and blessed New Year's. Thank you very much, Nikki. And Carol says, looking forward to stews with potatoes. There you go. Me too. Audrey says, Merry Christmas. Jennifer says, thanks. Consuelo says, have a blessed holiday. Oh, you guys are also nice. Happy holidays from Sherry. Thanks for always making me hungry. That's my job. I think potato salad is still okay in the summer. I like a little bit of grounding food. I can't eat lettuce, and I don't feel satisfied. So I certainly would do a potato salad in the summer, no problem. Again, you're not putting a lot of dense food into the diet. It's just one salad. Even if you had just some potato salad every day, a lot of the other foods would not be comfort foods, whereas in the winter they tend to be more comfort foods beyond potatoes, right? All right, everybody's wishing everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas, the whole bit. Thank you all. I wish you all the best. And I have no idea what I was hoping to maybe have David Price Francis back in January. He's got some updated information on his Partners in Passion energy book that he has. So I was maybe going to do that in January, but something will come up. So the next webinar will be in January. I'm also going to post when I send out the email tomorrow with the replay. I'm going to include the link for all the replays, because I think a lot of you don't know how to find the replays, and you can go back and listen to things that you may have missed or maybe you weren't around for, because they're all posted on the Inspired Learning Hub webpage. So they're really good for CEUs, and so I'm going to send that out as well. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and I will see you in the next decade in a few weeks. Good night, everyone.